right, well, I think we'll just start. Thank you, everybody who has joined us from overseas, whether it's New Zealand or different parts of Australia. We appreciate you taking the time to come and meet and listen to Kate Heath. Kate has just arrived over from Riyadh, I think just towards the end of last week. And we've just been to Brisbane on Monday, and obviously we're in Sydney this afternoon. So Kate, take it away.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I do have to put a disclaimer in that I am still a bit jet lagged. So if I do say things and then go, hang on, what am I saying? Don't judge me too harshly. But as Dawn said, my name is Kate. I'm the Programme Director for Nursing Recruitment and Retention at the King Faisal Specialist Hospital and Research Centre in Riyadh. I'm a nurse. I'm actually English but married and Australian, so my accent gets confused. I go both ways. Did my training here at ACU in Sydney, and then I've worked up and down the East Coast mainly, and then in the UK as well. And I've been at the King Faisal for 7 years. So I went for 2, and 7 years later I'm still there. And my job really here today is, or I believe my job is, to tell you warts and all about life in Saudi Arabia and working at King Faisal. So the Middle East is quite an interesting country in that it's very shiny and gold and marble everywhere, but it is still very much an emerging society. So it's not first world like we are here. You are going to a country that is quite different. And if you scratch the surface, in many respects, you could be in a third world country. So it's all kind of gold plated and shiny and new on the surface. But if you go into a shopping mall, the shopping mall will be phenomenal. It'll be, big and glitzy and like one of the top shopping centres here in Sydney. But if you go out the back doors, you could be in Calcutta or Islamabad or somewhere. It's a country of quite vast differences. You're the only one that's been there, so you have to keep me as honest as you can, but your experience would have been a little bit different being there as a tourist. And the country has changed massively in the last 4 years. So it literally changes overnight. Women couldn't drive, then suddenly it was announced women could drive, and the next day you see hundreds of women driving. And things literally, the change happens quickly in Saudi Arabia. So it's been an interesting time. As I said, I went for 2 years, and 7 years later I'm still there. So it obviously it has an appeal, but it can be challenging. So Saudi Arabia, where are we? We're the big yellow country in the middle of the world. It is great, particularly for Australia and New Zealanders, because we're so far from everything down here. And if you do want to do your trip to Europe, it's a massive trip to go over there. We're a 14-hour direct flight from Dubai. Dubai is about an hour and a half away from Riyadh. So although we can't do a direct flight into Australia at the moment, we are relatively quick. So it's about a 16-hour flight to get here if you get the quickest flights. But also you've got fantastic opportunities to get to the rest of the world, because you're not having to do this sort of 14-hour journey before that. And that is a big reason for Australians and Kiwis to go there, is so that they have access to travel. Now, obviously, that's been different over the last 2 years. We've not quite as dramatically as Australia and New Zealand, but Saudi closed the borders. The borders were closed for the best part of a year. And so we were kind of locked in or locked out. And I'm not going to tell you what that's like. I mean, it was, we certainly didn't have it as difficult as you guys here did. My son's in Melbourne, and I still think Melbourne had it worse than everybody else. You were in Melbourne. But it did mean that people's ability to travel was obviously curtailed, but everybody in the world was in the same situation. So the hospital that I represent, the King Faisal Specialist and Research Centre, we do have 3 sites. We have a hospital in Riyadh, a hospital in Jeddah, and a hospital in Medina, but I'm actually representing Riyadh. So we're the capital city. That's 6.5 million people, so it's a big city. It's also quite a young population. They're the biggest users of social media in the world. So, okay, strange question, but just going to put it out there. How much did you save last year? And the reason I ask this is because the other reason that people typically go is to save some cash. And The salaries, it's difficult when we just come from Queensland Health, where their salaries are so much higher than everywhere else in Australia. But even there, you could see when we got to the end of the presentation and I showed how much money you can potentially save, even Queensland Health workers were very pleasantly surprised. So you may not earn more than here, but if I said to you who managed to save $20,000 last year, did anyone manage from your basic salary only? Did anyone save 20,000? No? 10,000? Do you live at home with mum and dad?
No, I don't.
Did you save $20,000?
I live a lot over time though.
No. So I'm just saying only on your main base salary. If you took away the overtime. No, most people it's kind of 3, 4. Yeah. So most people, I've never, normally someone that saves 20,000 lives at home with mum and dad, which is why I said that. But it's hard to save money here, right? By the time you pay for rent or a mortgage and gas, electricity, internet, telephones, and then you've got your car and petrol, $2.06. I know, for petrol. And then you're getting your car serviced and you need new tyres and all those things. Everything adds up and you're not left with very much money at the end of it. So we'll come back to that a little bit later. But for now, this is part of the hospital. So the hospital is huge. What you can see on this photo in the background is kind of one of the main roads within Riyadh that has all the shopping centres, restaurants and cafes, etc. And there's a little over sort of in that section over there, there's a car parks and shops just showing you how close it is to the hospital. And then this is one part of the hospital. But it's massive. It's literally one corridor must be half a kilometre long, maybe longer. Oh, well, if you go from one side of the hospital through to the other, it's about a kilometre. But the main corridor through the middle of the hospital is over half a kilometre long. It's just huge. So it goes sort of from here all the way over to here. And then there's another section across the road. And this building is called it's known as KCOL, but it's the King Abdullah Centre for Oncology and Liver Disease. So that's all that's in that building is oncology and transplants and not cardiac transplants. It's new, it's probably 5 years old now, but not all of the hospital is new. Some of it is quite a bit older. Also in this building, in this picture, the honeycomb building is some of our female accommodation. And then you can just down on the left-hand side, you can see a roof. Most of the female accommodation is kind of in a line along this way. So staff nurses live on site. And we have just got male housing back, limited amount. You can live out, but I would say don't even think about living out until you've been there for sort of 3 to 6 months, because it adds complication to stuff. When you can roll out of bed at being work in 5 minutes, it's worth doing that at least until you find your feet. I keep going. There we go. So we're about 1,000 beds. Normally pre-COVID, we were 140 ICU beds. We doubled and then tripled. We got up to about 400 ICU beds at one time. So that involved, piping oxygen, getting the hemo ports into each area. So obviously those facilities have stayed, but we only operate about 140 ICU beds now. We didn't really get smashed by COVID. It was, we at most probably had about 200 patients at any one time. But I mean, when you look at some hospitals around the world, they were 800-900 beds at a time. So we were pretty lucky, and it is a very strictly vaccinated country. So we're all triply vaccinated. You have to, I had my first vaccine on, I suppose it would have been New Year's Eve, the year before last, way before everybody, like 6 months before everybody else here. And then we had our second ones. Oh, did you just see something? Something just flew past the window. It wasn't a person, but it was a flag or something, wasn't it? So I had my first one, I think, in December, and then the next one in February, and then the next one in October. And we have to be triply vaccinated to work. So if you can't go into a building unless you're fully vaccinated anywhere in the country. So if you are hesitant about vaccinations, you will have to resolve that before you go, because you simply won't be able to enter unless you're fully vaccinated. We also have the Children's Cancer Centre, which is known CCC, and that's it's 60 beds, but they've now gone up to about 14 PICU beds out there. And then they have a really, really busy outpatient department, which is kind of a treatment centre more than anything else. They're really, really, really sick babies out there. So one of the things about Saudi, or about King Faisal in particular, is we are the #1 hospital in the Middle East as a specialist hospital. You have to be, it's a tertiary referral hospital, so you have to be referred there. You can't just walk in and become a patient. And everybody is sick. Everybody has multiple comorbidities, mainly because of consanguinal marriages, so they don't have a great genetic pool, and traditionally because they're tribal, they're kind of married within their families, and so lots of really aggressive cancers. And therefore this little CCC hospital is very, very sweet. Did you go out there?
Yes,
It's very sweet. It was given as a gift. It was built as a gift by a family because of the care provided to his son, to the family's son. And it's a shame in a way that it is located where it is, but it has to be where it is because it was given. So and the program director, Narissa, who will interview you today, is just divine. She's absolutely lovely. So it's a very close-knit little supportive hospital. Yeah, it is. It's lovely. Jeddah currently has about 350 beds, and then Medina is a new hospital, not quite open, and it will have 300 beds when it's fully open. In Riyadh alone, we have over 12,000 employees. About 3,500 work in what we call nursing affairs, and there's about 2,800 nurses. So we call nurses staff nurses. They're just registered nurses. So all Division 1. What do you call them in Sydney? Fully registered nurses, not enrolled nurses, Division 2, whatever they are now. Yeah. Okay, so we also have the rest of that number then is made up from support staff and obviously the nurse leaders. If you have any questions, don't wait till the end. You're welcome to ask as we go through. So just some more pictures of the hospital. This big building here is the female accommodation, as I was saying, but also up in, I don't know if I can get the cursor, these buildings here, this is female accommodation as well. And the men's housing's kind of over here somewhere, hidden, well away from the women. Okay, so we are very multicultural. There's nursing staff from about 60 countries. Saudi nurses make up between 30 and 40% of the workforce. Obviously, they have to, and we have to invest in them because it's their country. About 39% of our staff nurses are Saudi, and then we also have different nurse leaders as well. Are these your colleagues? Come in. Hello. Thank you for joining us from work. Did you have far to come?
Not far at all, which is at the east.
Oh, fantastic. Nice and close. Does anyone work in emergency there? No. My niece, whom I'm having dinner with tonight, works. She's a doctor in emergencies, so it would have been funny if you knew. So I was just saying that we are a very multicultural workforce. About 18% of our staff nurses are male. That has to be limited because not all families will accept male nurses looking after them. So obviously that does make it a little bit difficult for us to have OR and ED, and the ICUs tend not to be quite so difficult. We can take more males in those areas, but pediatrics, for example, it's really difficult for us to have more than a few male nurses. And that is starting to change, but at the moment it's still pretty conservative with regard to having a male look after a female. About 20% of our workforce are Western, so Western being what we would consider Western generally. Why that's important is it is actually nice to have people that come from the same background as you with regard to your training and your education. So a lot of staff within the kingdom working at other hospitals want to come to King Faisal because we have the highest number of Western nurses. And it's that, if I say it's because you can sort of walk into the pan room and roll your eyes, it is kind of that, it's just being able to know that there's somebody else that's come from that, exactly the same kind of training that you've come from. What I would say though, that's really, really important is you have to be adaptable and flexible to work in Saudi, because if you're dealing with staff, working with staff from 30, 40, 50 different countries, there's obviously going to be more than one way to do something. And I used to be a control freak. I'll say that I'm not anymore. And I used to be a perfectionist, and it had to be done this way because that was the right way. And it doesn't work really well like that in Saudi. You've got to be able to roll a little bit, because if everything has to be your way, you will get frustrated very, very quickly. And the thing that I'm sure you've all witnessed it when somebody comes in and they've come from somewhere else, and it's, well, we don't do it like that where I come from, so you're not there anymore. So we make a choice to go there. And one of the things that's really important is just you do need to be adaptable and flexible. So we are magnet designated. There is a magnet hospital, I think, in Sydney. Is there one? No, there's a couple in Australia. I know the Princess Alexandra, I think, in Brisbane is magnet accredited. It's quite a prestigious credentialing system. So it's an award awarded by the American Nurses Credentialing Center, and it's basically recognises hospitals that meet certain criteria that are set by the American Nursing Credentialing Center. So they set benchmarks which are against American hospitals, top performing American hospitals. And then magnet hospitals have to, well, it's a 4-year journey to become magnet accredited. And during that time, you have to either meet those targets or demonstrate that you're on your way to achieving them. And then when you are designated, you must continue to meet those benchmarks. And if you don't, they'll take your benchmarking away. Sorry, they'll take your credentialing away. So it is very prestigious, but it doesn't mean a great deal to us because we don't know what magnet is. The whole reason for setting it up was that if you had nurses that were happy and content in their workforce, would attract more nurses to come and work in there. And as a result, you'd have a stable workforce, and that would improve patient outcomes, etc., etc. So it's quite a prestigious award. Does it mean that we're an American hospital? Absolutely not. We do aspire to follow an American model of care, but we're in the Middle East. So we are a Middle Eastern hospital. Okay. Why do I say that? Because when the Americans come to work, they often say, this isn't an American hospital. Yeah, well, no, we're not in America. So again, I think Aussies and Kiwis are normally a little bit more sensible about that, but Americans do tend to be a little bit American-centric, and when they see that it's magnet accredited, they assume it's going to be like their hospital at home, which it isn't going to be. And I'm sure when you've gone from one hospital to another, Bailey, maybe you, not because you said that you did your grad and you stayed there ever since, but if you went to St Vincent, stuff would be done differently. And it's that when you first arrive, knowing where things are and knowing the bits of paperwork and knowing what needs to be done where on the computer, that can be really challenging. And that's why it's really important to be able to go, okay, I don't know everything now, but I can do this. But you do need to prepare yourself for that because it is quite a big change. We also, this is part of the new hospital. So as I said, it's not all brand new and shiny and lovely, but some of it is, and the majority of the older buildings are being updated. So they often have 1 or 2 units closed whilst they're renovating and upgrading. And this is just part of the oncology, the infusion centre. And the only reason I put it up is because if we do have nurses with, nobody's from oncology, are they? No. We have 100 beds for day chemo. So it's a big service. OR, amazing. Lots of robots are in the ORs now, and we have robotic specialists there as well. If you are interested in OR, particularly if you have an interest in transplant, there are educational courses that will be put together that you can access whilst you're with us. So what happens when you first arrive in the kingdom? It's all a little bit of an assault on your brain because you come in flying forever and you're tired, It's typically an overnight flight, and you don't necessarily sleep as much as you would. So you arrive and you're exhausted, and then you start flying over Saudi. In an hour and a half, you're still flying over Saudi, and when you look out, it's just desert below you. So we're right in the middle of the country. I love it now because I see the beauty of the country, but when you first arrive, it is very different, and it seems a long way that you're just flying over the desert. Actually, it's no different really to if you ever look out of the plane when you come over kind of Darwin, you think, oh, back in Australia, and then 4 hours later, you're still flying over Australia. So it's kind of that middle part. And Riyadh is on a plain, it's quite high up above sea level, but it is right in the middle of the desert. So we get very, very hot, dry weather, which is fantastic. If I don't like humidity, so I'm rubbish up in Queensland. Places like Singapore, you know, when you go out of the doors and suddenly bang, it's in you. Yeah, so Riyadh is very, very dry, but it does get hot. So probably 4 months of the year are very high 40s. And then another 4 months are kind of in the 30s. And then we have about 4 months of really, really lovely in the 20s. That's winter. And yeah, really, really nice weather. So I love the weather there, but it does get quite hot. And so but you live your life in air conditioning. So it's quite manageable. So when you first arrive, this is the King Khalid airport in Riyadh. Just announced in the last few days they're building a new airport. So knowing Saudi, things happen very, very quickly, but I think you'll probably still land into this airport. It's we will meet you at the airport, or we will have a representative meet you at the airport. So prior to COVID, everyone used to fly in on the same flights, would come out and meet you and take you to your accommodation. During COVID, obviously, we weren't allowed to do that. And there's still some limitations on unnecessary sort of mixing with people that have arrived from overseas. So you may or may not be met by a nurse at the airport. But if you're not met by a nurse, then a representative will meet you and get you onto the transport that will bring you to the hospital. Then you go into hospital orientation, and that's all the administrative stuff. So it's just personal and benefits, talking about the different things so that if you have any issues or concerns, how to deal with them. A little bit about Saudi culture, and also about transportation. So there is a bus service that goes backwards and forwards out to the CCC, but also, for example, we suggest not to think about driving when you first arrive, because sure, you can hire a car, but the traffic there is a little bit mad. It's getting better. I'm going to say that's because women are now able to drive, but I'm not sure that that's actually the case. But if you've been to anywhere in Asia or India, you know, has thousands of cars and everyone's all driving, and they all need Saudi's like that, but on steroids. So it's big, powerful cars, and they drive really fast, and they all want to be at the front. So when the traffic lights change, it doesn't matter if you're turning that way and you're on the 4th lane over here. If you're Saudi, you want to be the first around. So
usually you can see 4 lanes,
and there'll be 5 or 6.
and you see 6 cars.
Yeah. So the better thing when you first arrive is we'll give you a number for a driver. A driver is typically an older, well, not necessarily older, but Indian, or typically Indian drivers, aren't there? Pakistani maybe, and they tend to be in their 40s, 50s, and they have a big 4-wheel drive, and you can just sit in the back and not worry about it. And it's you say my driver, but they might be a driver for 100 people, but if they can't come when you call them or send them a message, they'll send somebody else, and they always know who's pick up, always. I don't know how they describe us, I don't know, but they'll pull up right next to you. They're also really, really good at looking after you. So if you want something done and you haven't got the time, or you just can't be bothered, as long as you pay them for their time, they'll go and do whatever that job is for you. So if you want something fixed or picked up, or I was going to say, the smokers often say, can you go, food, can you pick us up food or cigarettes or whatever it is. But also if you've been out to a party or an embassy or something you've been drinking, they'll get you home safely. So you don't order a taxi, they'll be waiting for you, they know where you live, they'll get you home, and they're kind of important to you, aren't they?
Yeah, they still keep in contact with me now.
There you go.
Yeah. After years.
Yeah. So the driver I always used got stuck in India during COVID, and then his visa expired, and so he's been gone for about 2 years. But every couple of weeks, I get a message just saying hello, and you know he hopes to come back one day. So it's Hajj. You don't remember Hajj by any chance?
I usually got full day.
Okay.
Is that the guy that took Rita and I?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice guys. So again, we sort of go over all the stuff that you wouldn't think is necessary, but it is necessary because, well, the other thing is the road system is not great because they've got they're building a rail link, and so all the roads are closed off and you have to do U-turns everywhere, and so trying to follow a map is, you know, even on your phone, it might not reflect what the road situation actually is. So anyway, don't think about driving when you first arrive. We'll make sure that you have a number for somebody who can get you where you need to get safely. We also have a presentation on fire and safety, so it's all the kind of usual administrative stuff that you would have to do. And then you go into what we call GNO. Now, GNO will be, are you in contact with anyone that you did GNO with still?
All my lifetime.
Okay, so GNO is the group of nurses that arrive at the same time as you, and you will bond and be friends for the rest of your life, because you'll laugh, you'll scream, you'll cry with them every day for at least a few months. And you'll think, what have I done? And why have I come here? And why did I give up everything at home? And yet they'll be your friends forever, won't they?
Yeah.
And they really, really are important to you. So again, during COVID, everybody missed out on that because they came one at a time when we could get them on a flight. So now we're going back to traveling just once a month. And that means that you'll be arriving with a group, and they will be your GNO group, and they will be friends for, you'll meet people that you become family and more.
Yeah. Exactly.
So during the GNO, it's normally between 5 and 11 days, depending on how many people arrive. We'll go through all the usual stuff. So nursing policies and procedures, we do the competency and skills lab testing. We also do the charting. So we use a system called ISIS, which is a computerized system. We have Pixis. I'm sure you have those here as well. And then once you've done your orientation within GNO, you're then precepted or buddied with a clinical instructor as well in the unit. So we make sure that we wrap as much support around you when you arrive as we can. Some people after 7 shifts or even less have said, okay, you know, just leave me alone now, I'm fine. If I need you, I'll come and find you. Other people need more than 11 days, and that's fine too. We work with what the individuals need. If you're anybody coming on a locum contract or thinking of a locum, okay, the only thing I'd say is you kind of do all the tough work and then you leave. But if you're doing it for a reason, then that's absolutely understandable. But you're still having to do all that sort of transition, and it kind of takes 2 to 3 months or slightly more to kind of know what you're doing and feel okay about it, and then you leave. But you can do a 3-month contract and then it stands for another 3-month contract. So you can either, you can't leave the country in that time. So it does mean that you can go traveling around, but because of the visa you come in, you only get 1 visa in and 1 visa out. And that sounds strange, but yes, you need a visa to leave, not to actually leave, but because you're coming back in again. So you need what's called an exit re-entry visa. So I'll explain that now. So I always have an exit re-entry visa in my passport, and I pay more than, if I was just having a 1-in, 1-out visa, the hospital would cover that once a year for me. They pay for that. But I want to be able to leave, come and go whenever I want to. So I choose to pay 1,000 riyals a year. No, 1,000 riyals for 6 months. And it means that I can travel in and out all the time without having to get new visas all the time. Exchange rate.
Around $300.
Okay, so about $300. Yeah. So to me, that's it. It's worth it because if I want to go away for the weekend, it's there. If I need to go away to get home, I've got that visa there. And I do think it's a good idea. Just keep one. You have to use it though. If you don't use it, you will get a fine for not using it. But it is worth if you're 6 months. It's easy. Absolutely.
or like
Yeah.
a lot of like nearby countries that you can just spend overnight and come back.
Yeah, literally. But you would be mad to be there for 6 months and not get out, because although there's lots of stuff now to do in Saudi, far more even than when you were there, that is open and available, you do need to get out to recharge your batteries. You need to see the sea, you need to see green. It's amazing.
6 hours. It's usually 6 hours flight shopping.
Yeah, it's amazing. But you can drive to Bahrain. Bahrain's about a 4.5-hour drive, depending on the traffic jam at the causeway. You can now drive up into Jordan, which is a longer drive, but to be able to drive to Jordan, I think is pretty cool. And lots of people go to Egypt for the weekend, or there's lots and lots of travel opportunities, and now the world is open again. So we work 44 hours a week. Typically, you'd be on 12-hour shifts, and you're either in team A or B. If you are traveling with friends, you probably want to be in the same team as your friends, otherwise you won't see them because you'll be working opposite shifts. But you only work 22 shifts in 6 weeks, so there's going to be lots of days when you would be able to see them. But if you, as I said, if you're traveling with a friend, you may want to be in the same team, and you would request that when we know that you're coming. You also need to be prepared to work nights and days. However, we have some of those weird people that like to work nights, so permanent nights. I don't get that. I was never a night person, and but you don't always have to do 50%, but you do need to be prepared to. Overtime is paid at time and a half. Now, you may read, you may hear, but there is a delay with payment of overtime. Hopefully that will be resolved by the time that you come, and you would always get paid what you are owed. But the system for paying overtime is not paid by the hospital, it's paid by an external government agency. So it has to be collected for the month by the hospital. At the end of that month, it's sent out to this agency who takes a month or two to sort it out, and then send the money back, and then it gets paid in the next month. It's kind of thing. So it's, but the reason I mention is that if you speak to somebody and they say, oh, they never pay overtime, we do pay it, we just don't pay it well. We don't pay it on time. But if it comes to you leaving and you haven't been paid your overtime, at the end, they do a reconciliation check. They'll sit down with you and you're paid everything that you're owed at the end. So it's kind of savings. I don't worry about it. Saudi is not great at paying bills on time. I know that from having worked with them, you know, as a company working with them, but they'll always pay you what they owe you. It's just, it can be frustrating when you say, I worked overtime last week, why didn't I get paid it this week? Oh, what did I say? Okay, so this is the way that the teams work. So if you're in team A, you'd work 1 week, you'd work Sunday, Monday, have Tuesday, Wednesday off, work Thursday, Friday, Saturday, have Sunday, Monday off, work Tuesday, Wednesday, and then you'd have Thursday, Friday, Saturday off to work again on the Sunday, and it just rotates. So sometimes there's slight variations of that in a unit, but that's typically the way the shift pattern works. The weekend is Friday and Saturday, and we now get 55 days of annual leave. So we've got an extra day. They made one more day. But you tend not to use much of your annual leave, because if you want to go away for a week, if you worked in that second week, if you took Tuesday and Wednesday off, you'd actually have Saturday to Sunday off, Saturday to the following Sunday off, with only 2 days of annual leave. So people tend to accrue a lot of annual leave. You can accrue up to 100 days, and then they'll start hassling you to take it. And one thing just to be aware of too with leave, because for the last 2 years nobody could use leave, at the moment there's a lot of pressure on everybody wanting to take leave because now we can travel again. But of course not everybody can take leave because then there'd be nobody left. So that can be a little bit frustrating. The other thing is if you arrive kind of June, July, don't expect to get Christmas off, because it'd be like changing hospitals here. You probably wouldn't get it if you went from one hospital to another in Sydney. Chances are you're not going to get Christmas off in the first year. So obviously at least 50% of our workforce are Muslim. So the Westerners and the non-Muslims tend to work Ramadan, and the Muslims tend to work over the Christmas period. But we have a very large, well, it's not as large as it used to be, but most of our Indian and Filipino nurses, which make up probably about just less than 40% of the staff, most of them are actually Catholic, so they want Christmas off as well. So there is quite a bit of pressure about getting Christmas off. On site in the hospital grounds, we have a bank. I bank with NAB. I just do bank transfers from my phone. It's really easy, straightforward. It typically gets into the bank within about 2 days. I never transfer more than 9,900 Australian dollars, and that way it doesn't get reported through to anybody because it's less than 10,000. But don't transfer 10,000 because that will flag up a system that you've got an international transfer coming in. But NAB, some of the banks don't work well.
In New Zealand, it's good for them to use ANZ.
Yeah, but I know that NAB definitely works without any problems at the moment. In the housing that is provided, there is internet in most of the housing. It's probably all of the housing now. That's wired internet. But most people carry portable modems. Do we call them dongles here? Just like a little tiny portable modem. Yeah. Okay. So that way you can run all of your devices. So you don't just have data on your phone. You carry this little box with you, and it has a SIM that is loaded with data. And that way you can run multiple devices from it in one go. And when you get home, rather than having to pay for wired internet as well, they use their dongle. So it means that is that what you did?
I've got one and I don't even pay for my phone. I just connect it to Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that, people will not have data on their phone. So they carry a portable modem, and even their phone, they tether to this little dongle. All I'm saying is it's cheap, and it will be very convenient for you. We also have a couple of mini markets on the hospital grounds. They're not fantastic, but they're great if you want bread and milk. If you're coming off a night duty and want something before you go to bed. There's an electronic shop. Don't worry too much about trying to bring chargers with you because the plugs are quite unique over there. So you'll need to get them at the hospital. And there's also telephone shop, etc. there. There's a jeweller's on site which sells gold and diamonds, and they'll walk out and leave you standing in the shop and going, this is a jeweller's, and you've just walked out and left me with all these twinkly things, and that's Saudi Arabia for you. So it's a very, very safe place to live. I've never, in all the time I've been, I've never felt threatened once. Not once. Did you?
No. We same like we forgot our phone one day and got back at the same spot, still there.
And the only thing that might have happened is somebody will be sitting there watching it for you to make sure that it's coming.
Yeah.
You know, literally, it's very. You can walk anywhere and at any time. I used to live about 1 kilometre from the hospital, and I would walk home at night time. Not covered. When I say not covered, my hair would not be covered, and it was never. One time somebody stopped. I thought, oh, that's strange. Like, you know, and he wanted to give me a lift because it was hot, and it was hot. It was like 47, 48 degrees, and I was no, it's fine, thank you. And then he sort of circled around and came back about 5 minutes later, and he gave me a bottle of water. So it was. They are very kind, very generous people. Even if they have nothing, they'll still want to share whatever they have with you. So. They often sound aggressive. They'll often sound like they're fighting because Arabic spoken is it's not a pretty language. And so sometimes I think when you first get there, you can think, oh, why is everybody fighting and arguing all the time? And they're not. They could just be talking about anything. But it takes a little bit of time for your ear to get used to the fact that it's it's normal conversation and not fighting. Do you remember I used to tell a story about, we used to deal with an agent who was in New Zealand who was dealing with the visas. And one day, every time I would ring this man, he would just shout at me. And I used to dread having to call him because it was like I'd always done something wrong, but I didn't think I had. But that was how I felt when I would start talking to him on the phone. And one day, this lovely girl answered the phone and I said, oh, thank you so much. Have you started working there? And she said, yeah, I'm just going to be in the office for a few days. I said, please don't leave that man. He shouts at me every time I call. And she went quiet and I said, that man's your dad, isn't it? And she said, yes. She said, don't worry. She said, whenever I have friends over from school, it was a holiday job. Whenever I have friends over for dinner, we all everyone sits at the table, and you know what it's like, it's a big Arabic thing, so we're all eating. And she said, my friends sit there terrified, and the same thing comes out, oh, we thought you were having a big domestic, because everyone was getting, but it's just the way that Arabic sounds. So typically they will be very, very kind and very, very generous. So some more pictures of the hospital. You can just see it is quite a big building. We have these food trucks that come out about once a month. It's just nice to get outside, and they kind of they have a little market going on as well. Lots of, that's not a real tree, it's a fake tree. There's lots of sports facilities. They were closed during COVID, but will start to open up again now. Each of the accommodation blocks has a swimming pool. They do get used a lot during the summer. And most of the housing, where's you live? Okay. C's been closed.
Oh, really?
It's been made into offices because a lot of people have chosen to move out, which again, you can make a bit of extra money. And if you want freedom to live out, you can do. But I wouldn't think about doing that until you've been there for a couple of months as well. Also, you'll need to have what's called an Agama, which is like a work permit, in order to be able to rent. So don't think about doing it when you first get there, but your allowance is often more than you would pay. So some people do it to make a little bit of extra money. This is our old accommodation. So this is as bad as it gets. This is G complex. And most people now arriving would be in FG or, sorry, this is F complex. They'd be in FG or H. As you can see, I mean, the pictures look quite dark. It's not as dark in real life, but they're actually really nice little units. I lived in there for about 6 months, and it's super convenient. And if anything doesn't work, you just call housing and they come and fix it, even a light bulb. So everything's there, everything's provided. The only thing that you buy when you first arrive, you get kind of that hospital quality sheet, so you want to bring your own sheets and maybe your own towels as well, but they provide everything, cups and saucers, knives and forks, you know, kettles, the whole thing. Actually, I'm not sure if they provide electric kettles. I think they provide stovetop kettles, and I was always burning them because I forget.
I remember that.
This is just more of the housing that's available, and then this is the newer style accommodation, which is in H block. They don't have, it's kind of studio-ish, so there isn't a separate bedroom. Lots of people like it just because they're white tiles and dark timber. If you do want to be an H complex, you just need to mention that you're allergic to dust mites or carpets. Is there? Don't say that you want to be an H complex. Say that you want to be, that you have an allergy to carpet. If you have an allergy to cats, you are going to struggle because there's lots of cats in Saudi. And most of the cats around the hospital are the fault of the nurses because the nurses feed the cats and the cats just explode. And there's always, did you have a cat?
I am not a pet.
No, okay. Everybody has a cat. In fact, today, Laurie, now Cara, who you placed, is arriving back in Brisbane this afternoon with her cat, who has been flown from Beryl, the male street cat, who was taken from Saudi to Jersey, and he had to fly by private plane because of COVID. And then he's now being relocated from Jersey to Rockhampton, and he flies into Brisbane today, and there's the story of Beryl, the street cat.
It's going to Alice.
And then I think she's going to work in Alice Springs, and so Beryl, the male street cat.
Yeah.
Oh,
You're Laurie.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but anyway, loads of people adopt cats, and you're not supposed to. And I'm the one that then has to write to you saying, please don't keep a cat. I recently had to tell someone not to keep a bunny. I got a letter from housing, the head of housing, and they'd obviously Googled rabbit, and it came up, or the Arabic, you know, the English word for Arabic word of rabbit. And he said, please, and it was this big formal letter, but please tell them that they must get rid of their bunny. And it broke my, I wasn't quite sure how to handle that. Anyway. This is just the little supermarket that I was saying is on site, but there are loads of supermarkets around. There's also loads of home delivery, and you can get virtually everything except for pork and alcohol. And those are available on the block. Nobody's Muslim here, are they? No? You can get everything in the kingdom. It's just not spoken about. Lots of coffee. Unfortunately, they like Starbucks, so there's lots of Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts of all things. But anyway. So 4 or 5, 6 years ago, women couldn't drive. Now we can. For 2 or 3 years ago, we had to wear abayas, which were these black gowns that went from your shoulder down to the ground and down to your wrists. Now you don't have to. Even Saudi women don't have to. Most people would wear them a couple of times a week because it's easier than not. So if I was going to the supermarket, for example, I could go dressed as I am, or if I had a t-shirt on, I'd probably just throw an abaya over the top because they're not hot to wear because they're loose and kind of flowy. But very few people wear black. Non-Saudis wear black, and a lot of the young Saudi girls now wear these really beautiful, elaborate abayas. But they're not a hassle, are they? An abaya.
No, I love it. I enjoy it because I didn't have to think about what to wear inside. I just like put on my PJ and like put on my abaya and go.
And if it's really, really hot and you've been to the pool and you think, oh, I should just go to the supermarket, you can literally just put it on over your cosy and off you go, and no one would know what you're wearing because they're. I mean, you can get ones that do up at the front, or you can get a full kind of. Those are the easiest ones on the hot days because sometimes it's actually easier just to wear a great big black thing rather than a pair of shorts and a t-shirt and then get dressed over the top of it, because they are loose and flowy. So they're really, really useful. Officially, there's not alcohol in the country, and there used not to be cinemas in the country, but now there are, I think there's 50 in Riyadh. So they're huge, big cinemas. They didn't have cinemas for 30 years. Why do I tell you that? Really just to let you know that the country is changing dramatically, and it just keeps changing every day. Something new happens, and so it's quite a good time to be there. Mixed gender groups, if you're young and female, it's probably best not to travel somewhere with a male that you're not related to. You are now allowed to. You didn't used to be able to, but now you are. But you might, if you get stopped and questioned about your relationship with that person, it's easier not to. So what we do is say, just wherever you're going, meet people there rather than traveling in a car. And certainly don't travel with a Saudi male. Now, if they're a driver, that's fine. If they're like an Uber driver or whatever. But if a Saudi male colleague is asked to take you out for coffee, for example, my recommendation is don't go, because they'll get in trouble, not you. So there is still this thing about if you're not related, you shouldn't be traveling together. But it's not the law, so you can do it. But if I was your mother, I'd be forbidding you to marry a Saudi male.
Are any of the shops still segregated?
Nope.
Or
Used to be.
restaurants?
Oh, no, so it used to be that you go into a restaurant. I forgot about that. You used to go into a restaurant and there was a family section, which was for families and females, and then there was the male section. And you had to go into the family section because you couldn't go into the male section, but that's all changed now. They're all mixed.
So I have to share my experience.
Yes, come on.
So when I got there the first month, I go to McDonald's, and then I was there by myself, and I'm a single girl, and I look at the sign saying single. So I open the door, ready to go get in, and then like people inside is like, no. And it's like, I can't go to McDonald's. It's like, oh, okay.
But how many years ago was that?
8.
Yeah, so literally, even when I got there, I went 7 years ago, we crossed over by a few months. There was very much the male section, the females and family section. But now, yeah, it's all changed. So again, it must be difficult for the older generation because all this change is happening really quickly. And when you speak to people who've got young children, they say, oh, it's so tough because we knew what the rules were. And so, we kind of live by these rules, and now everything keeps changing. And so it is. But yeah, it used to be that you would get shouted at if you went to the wrong side. And they used to have, and they still do in some places, they are it's about privacy. It's about it's not anything else. It's just about if males and females were in the same area, then the women might get hassled by men looking at them. That was literally what it was about. And they used to have these little kind of cubicles with, well, they still do in some places with a curtain across them. So you can,
restaurants.
yeah, so you can go in with your friends and then they close the curtain, and then the women that would be covered could uncover without everybody else seeing them. So you still see them sometimes. I go camping a lot, and we end up in like tiny places in the middle of nowhere, and that's quite funny because I'll go into a restaurant. I always ask, is it okay if I come in? And they kind of, yeah, welcome you in. But you can see people go, oh my God, there's a woman in here. It's like really, and just because it's different for them. Fascinating. So lots of social life is around food, lots going on at the embassies and compounds. Every week there's 2 or 3 events now starting to happen. So nothing for 2 years, but all starting to happen again. And there's great opportunities to go trekking and camping in the desert, lots of different activity groups. And when you first arrive, you have to go to everything that you're asked to, even if you only go once and never go again, because each month there's new arrivals. So if you don't take up the offer on the first time, you might not get asked again, because then the next group of people are coming. So it's worth trying everything once, and then if you don't want to do it again, you know, you don't have to. But you do need to socialise, because you are away from family, you are away from a lot that is familiar to you. And so it is important to actually not just go home and sit in your room. Around Riyadh, there's lots of lovely places to see. They have this season now called Riyadh season, and it was concerts and sports events and like a great big fun fair that's just gone on, I don't know, it seems to have gone on for about 3 or 4 months. And that happens every year now. So it's through the winter. And I think they've had something like 8 million people go to these different events. So it's a really, really big thing. And again, even to go to a concert, there's no way that you'd have even thought about that when you were there.
I went to party like more than the times that I go to a party.
Oh, you're talking about, yeah, social life. We often have to tell people to curb it back a bit, because it can be very, very full on. But that wouldn't be the Riyadh season. That would be at the compounds and embassies. And really, and the Australians are the worst. They like to party hard. So there is definitely a big social scene. We just say don't talk about it at work, because someone will hear and may take offence to it. So it's better not to be talking about where you were and what you've been doing. Unlikely to ever be an issue, but just out of respect, because we shouldn't be drinking. Perhaps that suggests that we do, but yeah, there's a very, very active social scene, and most of it is around compounds and the embassies. So once you're in the compounds, Saudis can't come into that, so there'll even be bars in some of the compounds, despite the fact there's no alcohol in the kingdom. This is the DQ. I actually live in the diplomatic quarter, and there's this lovely, it's about 15 minutes away from the hospital, and there's a big walking, running, cycling track around the outside. It's about 16 kilometres, and now there's hundreds of cafes and restaurants in the, not hundreds, but 50 cafes and restaurants in the DQ. So it's really nice to go and be able to walk, and I just wear a t-shirt and a pair of shorts and go for a walk, which I wouldn't do if I wasn't in the diplomatic quarter. The Red Sea is obviously over to our west. It's really, really beautiful, and it really is this colour. This is down at the Faris Islands, and lots of people go down here, and you can go snorkeling, and I got really, really badly sunburnt snorkeling. I didn't think about the fact that while I was in the water, I was going to get all this sun beaming down on me. So that was my worst sunburn experience. The desert obviously is all around us and quite beautiful. This is up in the northwest of the country, which is phenomenal. It's a really, really beautiful area, and this is where they're basing a lot of tourism in the country. So most people come in, there's flights every day that come in internationally into a place called Alula, and it's just breathtaking. It's built by the same people as Petra in Jordan. Just more of the desert. As you can see, I like the desert. This area is up near, it's called Wadi Dissa, and again, it's up in the northwest, and it's biblical, but I mean, it is, as Moses as well is there, and this is where the Bible was based. It was in that area. It's literally just across the border from Jordan and Israel. This is just outside of Riyadh. It's actually a pigeon coop, and it's about 4 or 5 stories high. And Riyadh is built where it is because it was an oasis, so it's built in the middle of the desert. Why would you build a city there? But it's because that's where water was. And so there's these great big industrial water bottling plants in the middle of the city. And to begin with, I was thinking, why would you put a big factory in the middle of the city? But that's because that's where the water was, and that's why the city came there. So it used to be a very fertile area, and they used to gather the pigeon droppings for fertilizer. But now they've depleted the water, so the agriculture has gone. But these buildings are still around, and they're really cool. And this is called the Edge of the World. It's about an hour and a half from the hospital. It doesn't look as dramatic there as it really is, but it's about 300 meters tall, and it's literally like the edge of the world. It just drops away. Lots of people go out there on day trips, or you can go out camping, and we do trips from the hospital via the social club. And this is, again, up in Alula. You can see how similar it is to Petra. Really, really beautiful. So if you do come, even if you come on a locum visa, you can actually get out and see all of these amazing things. This was Christmas Day 2 years ago, and that rock is actually naturally split, and it's in the middle of the desert, but pretty cool. And some of the architecture, you don't see many buildings that are built of anything other than mud. So these are down on the Farrison Islands, and they're quite unique. Camel Festival every year is pretty cool. Didn't go for the last few years because of COVID, but it is pretty cool. And there's lots of things you can go out horse riding and camping, and again we do trips from the hospital. And I thought that was a pretty cool photo because he was laughing. But traveling weekends away, easy to get to Jeddah. Jeddah is about an hour and a half flight. Alula is also about an hour and a half. Bahrain is about an hour's flight or a 4-hour drive, and Dubai is about an hour and a half. So lots of people literally go for the weekend, or they'll take a day, or on that 3 or 4 day break, and get away. Really, really cheap flights, maybe 200. Can't believe how expensive flights are. I was saying to the girls, but to get from Melbourne to Brisbane is only $2,000.
Because of the petrol.
Ridiculous.
I paid return last week $800 to get from Melbourne to Sydney.
Well, 2,000 to get from Melbourne to Brisbane one way. Anyway, I could have gone to Europe for that. But the flights, there's lots of smaller airlines opened up as well, so the flights are very competitive. It used to be that you could only go on Saudi Air, and so you had to pay, Qantas type flights, but now they've got Jetstar type airlines. Cairo, Beirut, Jordan, all within a couple of hours. India and Africa, 3 or 4 hours. You can get up to the Mediterranean around Rome or the south of France in 5 hours, and London's only 6.5 hours. So that's one of the reasons why people, particularly Aussies and Kiwis, love going there. So the important bit, why we go, annual leave. So until about 10 days ago, we had 54 days. As I said, we've now got an extra day, so we get 55 days of annual leave a year. If you work in an office, which none of you would do, then your weekends, it's no point me really telling you, apart from the fact that I've started saying it, and now I don't want to confuse you. So I, for example, because I work business hours, if I'm away for 2 weeks, my weekend days count as annual leave as well. So if I'm away for 2 5-day weeks, it's actually 12 days of leave, which sucks. But if you're doing shift work, it doesn't work like that. So you get 55 days of annual leave. And if you think about the way that shift pattern works, if you're taking 2 days off and getting 7 days off, you don't use much of your leave.
If you don't use your leave, does it get?
You can accrue 100 days. Lots of people at the moment have got 200 days because we couldn't go away. So they have been paying it out, but they try to keep you under 100 days, and they'll pay that out. Yeah, or what you can do as well, if you've got over 100 days, you could take terminal leave. So you say if you've got 120 days, your last 20 days of your contract, you can take as terminal leave, so you can leave earlier, rather than waste that time. Yeah. So your accommodation is provided free of charge. You'll have no bills. So if you have your air conditioning on 18 degrees, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you're not paying for it. So you can save a lot of money, obviously, by the fact that you're not paying for bills at all. If you choose to take the housing allowance, you do have to pay your bills. And it is hot, so do be prepared that you have to pay quite a lot on your air conditioning or be hot in your accommodation. So, but as I said, I wouldn't do anything with moving out until you've been there for at least 3 to 6 months. Overtime, if you want to work it, and depending on availability, is paid at time and a half. Low cost of living, Australia is expensive. Every time I come back, I kind of go, wow, a loaf of bread is $5, kind of, and that's not a fancy loaf of bread. So the world has got more expensive without a doubt, but it's a lot cheaper. The cost of living is cheaper there. Because we use drivers, I kind of pay 30 Riyals, which is like $10 every time I get driven somewhere. But I'm not paying for petrol and new tyres and car insurance and registration. So the cost of living is actually a lot cheaper because we're just not paying for the stuff that we have because we live here. You also get free comprehensive healthcare and emergency dental care. Lots of people actually have dental work while they're in Saudi, so they'll come and have braces because they're so much cheaper there. And they suddenly have disposable income, so they can afford to have that orthodontic work. So we don't pay tax in Saudi, so our income, what you earn, is there's no tax taken out of it. And in the I'm not going to give you tax advice, but in the 7 years that I've been there, I don't pay tax in Australia. I do pay tax in Australia, but I only pay it on income that I earn from a rental property here. But on my income that I earn over there, I don't pay tax. And the government know I'm working over there, but it's earned over there. And so what I would say is if anybody has a property that you're going to derive income from, it's worth speaking to a tax agent who is very, very experienced in dealing with people who work in the Middle East. Because if you ask your guy on the corner who works for, I can't think of what they're called now, but like the local tax guy that does your tax return, they will often give incorrect advice. So you shouldn't have to pay any tax whilst you're working in Saudi Arabia. But you will pay tax if you have an income derived in Australia. That makes sense? So if you are coming and you do have a property or you're self-employed, it's worth spending the money to get proper advice. So if you come to us for 2 years, you get a sign-on bonus of 5,000 US. If you come and sign a 1-year contract, you get a 2,500 US sign-on bonus. You also will typically get a specialty premium. So depending on the area that you work in, you'll get a specialty premium, but it won't be written in your contract. And the reason that it won't be written in your contract is they're not a guaranteed premium. They're reviewed each year and they're either renewed or not. This year, they actually, not only were they renewed, but they were increased. But what I'm going to show you with regard to savings potential, because that's not a guaranteed component of your salary, we're not going to include it in any thinking. But when you get a letter of offer, CCM will also be able to tell you in that unit they currently get 8,000 Riyals extra a month or 1,500 Riyals extra a month. That can be like $300 to $500 more a month, but because it's not guaranteed, it won't be documented on your contract. Okay, so if you arrive in November and it's paid till the end of December and then they decide to stop premiums, you'd only get it for a month. And you're not supposed to get it for the first 90 days that you're there. You usually do, but you're not supposed to. It doesn't matter that you got it, they're not going to take it away. But the agreement is that we'll get you onto the correct line where premium is available within 3 months. We can typically get you on quicker than that. So you also get, for each year that you're with us, for the first 4 years, you get half a month's salary at the end when you leave as severance pay. So we don't pay super, but this is kind of like enforced savings. So this could be your super contribution, if you like, because at the end of each year, you get half a month's salary as severance paid when you leave. If you stay past 4 years, you get a month's salary for each year after 4 years. So that's kind of the equivalent to a pension funding, but it's paid at the end of your contract. And in your second year and every year after, you get an annual bonus of a month's salary. So you don't get it in the first year, but when you recontract, you get it for the second year. Now, if you recontracted for your second year and you got your bonus and then you decided to leave, they will take pro rata, they'll take back from your final check the fact that you haven't stayed for the full year. Yeah. All of this, because this is the important bit, it will get detailed. You put like a spreadsheet, don't you? Or you bullet points it.
Put everything into an email when you get an offer letter. We'll go through that with you.
Yeah. So most of you have got more than 2 years experience, yeah? Okay, what we're going to do is I'm just going to show you the calculations for if you only had 2 years of experience. If you have more than 2 years, your salary will be higher, but we can only do one slide. So we're just going to show, annual flight. So your tickets you get at the beginning of your contract and the end of your contract is one return ticket there and back. If you stay for longer than a year, which you're kind of mad not to, because the first year goes really quickly. But in your second, third, fourth year, you'll get an annual leave ticket that you can either use to come back to Australia, or you can cash it in and go wherever you like, but don't tell your mother that I've said that. She'll be expecting you to come home. So that in the first year, you don't get an annual leave ticket. You only get that in the second year and each year after that. So we're going to look at if you came on a 1-year contract and your basic salary, because you only had 2 years of experience, would be in Saudi Riyals would be 14,180. Now on last week's exchange rate, that's the amount, so 5,200 if you had 2 years of experience. You're also going to get the specialty premium if you're working in nearly every area has at least 1,000 Riyals a month. The only areas that don't really are, bizarrely, labour and delivery and the clinics. So if you're working in an inpatient unit or a specialist unit or OR, then you'll get at least 1,000 Riyals, which is about $300 a month. Yeah. Up to 1,500 a month on top of your basic salary. You're also going to, if you come for 1 year, you'll get $2,500 US as a sign-on bonus. Yeah. So if you looked, and then the severance pay, if you came for 1 year, that's going to be half a month's salary. So if you look down at this bottom cube here, in 12 months, you get 12 months basic salary. You get half a month's severance pay, which would equal this amount. And that's how much it would be in Australian dollars, take home, because you're not paying tax. So is that higher or lower, Bailey, than you earn at the moment?
Just a little bit higher.
Just a little bit. Yeah. Okay. So Bailey, who does all the overtime. So if you went for 1 year, so if you expected to spend 2,500 Riyals a month, so about $900 on food and internet, because that's all you have to pay for when you're there. So no overtime. Not including that specialty premium, which for you would probably be at least 300, possibly 500 a month, including that severance pay. So if we take that, if we take 12 times this amount, 12 times the 2,500, that would equal 30,000, and we deduct that from the amount that you had, that we'd said that you would earn in a year. So this is the amount that you would earn, and then this is your living costs. Should be able to save this amount. Is that more than you saved last year, even with all your overtime? Okay, so just to go over that again, this is the amount that we're saying that you would earn. 67,000 is what you would earn if you had 2 years of experience. So down at the bottom here, we said you'd earn 67,000 in 12 months. And then we're taking away 12 times 2,500 Riyals, which is your living expenses for food and internet. So the 67 minus 30,000, which is just under 11,000. That's why people come and that's why people stay. Because if you suddenly got the potential, even if you blow half of that, if you say I'm spending $30,000 in a year on amazing trips and I'm going to fly business class and stay in 5-star hotels and I'm going to have a Louis Vuitton handbag, and that's what people do, you could still save $25,000, $30,000. And that's without your sign-on bonus, that's without your specialty premiums, and that's without overtime. So that's working 44 hours a week. Yeah. She's smiling. Now, if you earn more than that now, you've probably got more experience. So Bailey, when she came in, said you're your 3rd year now, yeah? Yeah. So that's kind of right for you. But if you've got more experience than that, your letter of offer will reflect your years of experience. So if we look at 2 years, very similar, except for in a second year, you're going to get that extra month's salary because you get the annual bonus. So you'll get 12 times your monthly salary. You'll get an annual bonus of another month's salary. You'll get 2 half months as severance pay. So at the end, you actually end up with 26 months salary in 24 months, which equals, let's say, 140,000 Australian dollars. And if we look at the savings potential, same amount of spend. So if we say over 2 years, that's going to be, let's say, 22,000 Australian dollars. So 140,000 less 22,000, you've got the ability to save 118,000 in 2 years. Yeah, it's called golden handcuffs. So people come and it's very hard to then think, I might have spent a lot of money last year, but maybe I should stay for another year to put a deposit together for a house. And people come and they come for, there's no way I'm coming for longer than 2 years. And they end up staying 3, 4, 5, 6 years. So it's, yeah, it's incredible. And the grass is always greener. So people often, right, I'm going home, it's much better in Australia when they get here. And then they want to come back. So it can be confusing once you start doing it because you never know where to be. So what happens from here is you will be interviewed if you want to. If you only came to listen and don't want to be interviewed, that's absolutely fine. Please think about it. Would love to maybe see you again at a future date. Or if you would like to be interviewed, we can arrange that. I know that people are being interviewed. You're being interviewed today, and Bailey's being interviewed today. Yeah. So, and we've got other people online who are being interviewed as well. So once you're approved, you will get feedback today. One way or another, we can get feedback to you by text or email. There's quite a lot of paperwork to complete, and it seems that you're filling in the same paperwork over and over and over, and it is still lots of paper, but you do need to do it, unfortunately, because there's all sorts of different bodies that have to be dealt with. It sometimes seems that you're doing things out of order, but do follow the instructions that the CCM give, because stuff expires and you don't want to go and have to have something done again because you didn't do it in the order that you were asked to. You do need to have a medical. So if you have any medical conditions, or even if it's something as simple as diabetes, do mention it to CCM early on, because we'll get medical clearance for you, or find out that you wouldn't get medical clearance. And it's better to find out that now than in 6 months' time when you think you're ready to go. Your visa, again, it has to be, you have to travel within 3 months of your visa being issued, but we like you to travel sooner than 3 months if at all possible. The process is typically, in a pre-COVID world, it was between 4 and 7, 8, 9 months was the average time to get there. So 4 months if you really, really want to get there quickly. If you're coming on a locum, it's quicker than that. But obviously there are those restrictions with the locum visa. Your travel arrangements are all made by CCM. We're in consultation with the hospital. We'll fly you in on a particular day so that you can join on that GNO group. And then either you will be met by a nurse at the airport waiting for you, or if not, it will be our airport rep. So we have an office at the airport, and it's manned all the time. But if somehow you manage to miss that person, we just say, don't leave the airport, turn to the right and keep walking. And the very last door that you come to is the King Faisal Hospital representative, and just wait there and we'll come and find you. So if you leave, you're not really in danger if you leave the airport. But the problem is, people, there's all sorts of King Faisal hospitals, and they'll take you to King Fahd because they thought that's what you were saying. And even if you get to King Faisal Hospital, it's huge and you're not going to know where to go. So you'll have all sorts of telephone numbers and contact details, and it happens maybe once a year that someone manages to slip through and make their way to the hospital without us being there to meet them. You know, they've been at one door and we've been at another. So don't get stressed about it, but the easiest thing is don't leave the airport. And then you come into the GHO, GNO, and then from there into the unit. So lots of information, I know. No questions asked, but
actually, if anybody that is listening online would like to ask a question, they can actually just use put the little hand up, or you can type in a question as well.
Fantastic, and
Yeah,
you're
that would be
also
great, and
welcome.
obviously anybody here as well. There was a question. Oh, great. Oh, first question. What are the benefits for a locum? Does operating theatre apply, and do we get some sort of leave? What's the orientation like for locum? Do we also join a GNO group?
Yeah, so locums get paid about, it's roughly 20-25% more, just as it would be in Australia, because you don't get the leave entitlements. So you still work exactly the same shift pattern, that 22 shifts in 6 weeks. But you can take you get those natural days off, but you can't take annual leave during that time. The other thing is that it sounds rough, but it's the way that the contract is worked with labour law. If you're sick, of course you can be off, but you do have to make up the hours because you have to work the number of hours that are specified within the 90 days that you're there. So we make sure that we map that all out for you so that you understand that when you arrive. So you do get paid quite considerably more, but it's only the same as your annual leave and sickness benefit rolled up, which would be the same, as I said, as working casual work here. We do have some contracts for ORs, locum contracts. It will depend on your specialty. And
Overtime.
overtime, you can't work overtime on a locum visa.
You can't.
No.
Okay. And do they join with the GNO?
They do. If I'm honest, we try to get you off the GNO as quickly as possible because you're only there for 90 days and it goes really quickly. But we will try to keep it as close to the other new arrivals because it's at the end of the day, you've got the same amount of new stuff to learn. Yeah.
Thanks, Kate.
Thank you.
We might get Kathy over first so she can do the name.
Good luck.
We can just start here if you don't mind.
Does anybody else have any questions that they want to ask Kate?
I do. You know how you're saying the PEDS oncology is 20 minutes away? Is it like a hospital transport like bus,
Yeah.
or is it independent?
No, it's a hospital transport bus. They're new buses, so they used to be little old buses and it was a nightmare, but now they're big new buses, all air conditioned. But I do want to be honest that it is one of those things where you will want to put your, you will not want to be watching the traffic. So people just get at the back, put your seatbelt on and just let the world go by. There is a paediatric unit in the main hospital, but Narissa will be able to, she'll be able to best advise where your experience would match. And we did discuss that before you were even scheduled for an interview. And I think the girls may have spoken to you about where your preference was. So we'll work it out at the interview, it'll be fine. Yeah.
Sylvester has a question. Sylvester, if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask the question. Would you like to ask the question again? Okay, we can always just maybe just type in the question, maybe. Oh, here's another question. Is there options for primary health or mental health work?
No. No is the short answer. Mental health is not really, it's definitely an issue, and there are definitely psych services offered within the hospital, but we're not we don't offer a psychiatric inpatient service. So we have 2 psych nurses or 2 mental health nurses in the whole hospital. So we're definitely not the area to look at for mental health. And primary health, we do have a home healthcare service. It's not huge, but it is expanding. So home healthcare may be suitable for primary health. And we have also have a family medicine, which is like a huge GP service, and that looks after, it provides a GP service to the employees and their families. So it's a massive service, but hopefully that answers that question.
Thanks, Kate.
Yes.
Sorry, being a male, How does that work with patient allocation and
Yeah.
dealing with that?
So it will depend on the individuals in the unit. So some families will be fine. What area do you work in?
General medical and health.
Yeah. Okay, lovely. So there will definitely be potential to work in the Middle East in those areas being male, but we do have to provide, we can only take a certain percentage. So the patient allocation is always a little bit tricky. And that's why we kind of limit the amount of male nurses that we take into, particularly the inpatient unit. So as I said earlier, emergency ICU, ORs, they tend not to be such an issue because, I don't know, I guess because the patients are typically asleep, maybe. But it can cause us a few issues, which is why it can take longer to get an offer than you would expect sometimes, because we have to make sure that we're not going over a certain percentage of males, because that just then becomes a problem. And you know, so we try to cap it at 20%. And we're also trying to accommodate an awful lot of young Saudi male nurses, and obviously they get preference. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. No, go ahead. Oh, sorry. So just on that note, so I probably missed the beginning as well. And so you mentioned that so ED and ICU and ORs usually are the go-to. But so for someone that doesn't have those experience, like I work in just surgical work before, but now I've got cath lab experience.
Yes.
Would there be any?
Yeah, so I might have said something confusing there, sorry. So we have opportunities across all areas of the hospital. It's just we're quite limited in the opportunities we can offer to men because some patients will prefer not to have a male nurse. So yeah, we have opportunities across all areas except for outpatients. We don't hire Westerners into outpatient areas, and that's because a lot of Saudi females, because of family expectations, can't work nights and weekends, and we have to be culturally. It's tricky, so we tend to keep the outpatient areas for some of those nurses who are, you know, lovely nurses but can't work in an inpatient setting because of family pressures. So yeah, we have vacancies across all areas.
We have a question from Lisa. Is the medical day unit just day shifts, or does that include night shifts as well?
Not full night shifts, but it does have extended hours. It is a very transactional service, so they're busy. They have thousands of slots within a week, and you can be expected to work after hours, so past the 7 p.m. So we normally work from 7 till 7:30 a.m. and p.m. DMU can go up to, I think, midnight, and they also work on the weekends. Day medical unit doesn't have very many vacancies. It's not somewhere that we get a great deal of turnover.
Okay, thank you. Bjorn is asking, are there any work opportunities in education? He currently works as an educator in emergency.
Yep, so definitely yes, and often we will have people, so when you first arrive, in order to be promoted, you have to be with us for 2 years. So if you come as a staff nurse and you want to be promoted to an educator, which is sort of 1 grade higher, you do need to be with us for 2 years before you're eligible to apply for a promotion. However, we do have some people act straight away. So as long as you could be a staff nurse acting as an educator if there is a vacancy, and you're deemed to be the most suitable person. But with in some areas, it is definitely advantageous to be bilingual, to be Arabic speaking as well. So there are definitely opportunities, yes, for education, but probably not as much as if you were Arabic speaking, because you've got this, you're trying to educate through a second language.
Is it easier to sometimes avail of a more senior level if you are already working there?
Possibly yes, but I think so we have lots of Westerners act in positions because they say, I only want to come as a staff nurse. I don't want all the issues of being a leader or you know, taking on additional responsibility. And then they get there and they realise that they really miss education. for example. So they, if there is an opportunity there, they will be considered. They wouldn't not be considered. But we are guests in the country, and we do need to make sure that we're actually paid more than the Saudis. And the reason that we're paid more than the Saudis is we need to share what we know and be gracious guests in the country, because we're only there and then we're leaving. Whereas, so yeah, the fact that we get paid more than Saudis is kind of indicative of the fact that why do they want us? They want us because they want us to share our skills and experience.
Thank you. Florence is asking, are we allowed to come with husbands?
Okay, as a staff nurse, they could come on a visit visa, so they could get a tourist visa, and they can stay for up to 6 months, but they can't stay, males can't stay in female housing, and females can't stay in male housing, so you would need to be living out and renting. Getting a tourist visa is easy, it's just done online these days, but we wouldn't sponsor a husband to come, so they would be a tourist, they'd be on a tourist visa.
Okay, great, thanks. Go ahead.
Sorry, I've actually got a lot of questions in my head.
It's good. Lots of people tend to have the same question, so keep asking.
Because I also had a look at other countries, and so some of the countries you need to take the English test.
You don't have to come to Saudi. So the fact that you're licensed in Australia or New Zealand or wherever you are, and you do need to sit an exam. It's called the prometric exam. And if you have studied in the last few years, it's not going to be an issue for you. It's a generalist exam.
That's for everyone.
Yeah, for everyone. Yeah, and you sit that here in Australia or New Zealand or wherever you are. Yeah.
Would we do that here?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Is there a testing centre in Sydney? No, prometric.
Yeah, Sydney, Brisbane, and Melbourne.
And New Zealand, Auckland.
And Perth. Yeah, and New Zealand, Auckland.
And does your agency sort of help you to?
So CCM will absolutely guide you the whole way through. So they literally will, the minute that you're interviewed and say, yes, you're interested, they'll start to guide you in every step, everything that you need to do at each step. Yeah.
Okay, great. Do you take all experience into consideration when looking at salaries, or just the experience that you have in one particular area that you're being hired?
No, all areas, as long as it's as a staff nurse or as a nurse, a registered nurse.
Just saying, if you stay like for a year, 2 years, is there possibilities to be able to transfer to different wards as well?
You have to complete your initial contract before you're eligible to transfer. So your initial contract, typically they look at a 2-year contract. So to be eligible to transfer and promote is you have to complete that initial contract, because we bring you in because of the expertise in the area that you're currently working. So to bring you in and then move somewhere else is kind of defeats the purpose. So yeah, as soon as you get that 2 years under your belt, we advertise positions and you can apply for those positions either online, or we'll send out an expressions of interest through the internal email. And that's how people then, you know, how the positions are advertised, the vacancies are advertised.
No more for me. Another question.
Yeah.
So if that's the first added into.
No, you need to leave and then you'd have to come back on a full visa.
Okay. So the premium and everything that you mentioned starts from your 1-year contract. From the
That's the premium.
I think when you go back, you have to go back from the beginning. So you actually have to leave Saudi and come back, go through the whole process, which is a lot more detailed than if you just go over on the locum.
And it would take probably 4 to 6 months minimum.
You're better off going over on a 12-month contract and having annual leave as you go. And
if you go on a 1-year contract, to me, locum, I get why people think, oh, I'll go and try it. You don't get paid more because you don't get those benefits that you're being, that you accrue. So you don't get sick leave, you don't get annual leave. Sure, you get paid more in your paycheck, but you're not accruing all those other things that have a monetary value to them. So, and those equal each other. But if you, 3 months, the first 3 months is really tough. first 3 months when you go anywhere new is tough because you're trying to work out how to do everything and where everything is. And when you go to a different country with such a different culture, it's really tough. And you will question, why have I done this? And then suddenly everything starts to fall into place. You go, oh yeah, I can do this. And then you take into account the fact you've got 55 days of annual leave. You kind of 6, 7 months have gone in your first 90 days, and then all of that annual leave that you get. And it's only a couple of months, and then you've done a year. So I think a locum, you go through all the same heartache when you first arrive, all of the kind of angst and not knowing how to do stuff, and then you're leaving. Also, people don't tend to assimilate the same way because they know they're only there for 3 months. So it's like, well, I'm leaving in 2 months. Why would I bother doing that? So you have a very different experience when you're going as a locum. People don't get in there and really give it a good go because they know that they're going in a few weeks. And if you go for that year, it's easy to recontract for a second year, but you won't get the other 2.5. So if you go for 1 year, you get $2,500 US sign-on bonus. If you go for 2 years, you get 5,000 US sign-on bonus. If you do 1 year and then stay for the second year, you don't get another 2.5. So yeah, it's only $2,500 American dollars, but that's a lot of money, that difference. And 2 years, very, very rarely do people come. During COVID, people did come and stay a year and go, you know what, this is too hard, because they were away from family, they couldn't travel, everything was closed, it was tough. But very rarely do people come and only stay for a year. Very rarely.
And same goes with if you sign on, and then once with the fund, I think you
No, yes, you would, because you would. Do you know, I'm not 100%, I'm not going to answer that. I'd have to come back to you, because if you come on a locum and then you come back on a 2-year contract, technically speaking, you're a rehire. So technically speaking, you wouldn't get the sign-on bonus because you've already been there. So I'd have to check that and get back to you. Yeah, if you remind the girls at CCM, because I'll have to go back and look that up. Okay. Yeah.
Just wondering, if I want to work in ED or ICU over there, how many years of experience?
2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you've got less than 2 years, but you probably have close to 2 years by the time you arrive, then we take that. We'll certainly interview you, but they might say, get a little bit more experience before you come, because as I said, there's no easy patient. Everyone's really sick. And it's not like you've got a couple of difficult ones and a couple of easy ones and some will go home. They're all really sick.
We've got Lisa asking, other shifts 50-50, night shifts to day shifts.
Yep, but not always. You have to be prepared to work 50-50. But there are some people that prefer night duty, so sometimes you won't have to, but you do need to be prepared to work 50-50. Okay, so what we'll do, you're being interviewed. Yes. I think you just came to the presentation, correct? If you decide, and other people online, thank you so much for attending. If you do have questions, CCM, they kind of really know what they've been doing. They've been doing this for an awfully long time. So they certainly will get answers to you straight away. But if there is something you ask that they haven't heard before, they'll ask me, and I might have to go back to the right department and find out the answer to that. But we're very happy to answer any questions. If you do want to be interviewed, it's easy. Just let us know. We'll organise an interview. We can, I think you have a career break, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you do need to have been working for at least the last 12 months. Otherwise, it's very, very difficult with your Saudi Commission, which is your licensing process. So you'd need to get 12 months again before you were able to apply, or at least sort of, 10 months, and then you'd have the 12 months by the time you get there. But it's been really lovely to meet you. I'll be here for a little longer. I do need to just start getting feedback from the interviews that have been taking place. So if I do look at my phone, that's the reason why. But otherwise, I'll be here if you do have any more questions. Okay.
Thank you.